For Craig Melvin, the art of broadcasting has never been merely about reading from a teleprompter or transitioning smoothly between segments on Today. It has become, over the years, a profound exercise in emotional intelligence, a daily test of the heart's flexibility as he pivots between stories of celebration and catastrophe, between a jubilant reunion of long-lost siblings and the grim statistics of a hurricane's aftermath, often within the span of a single commercial break. And for viewers in their early 60s, men and women who have themselves mastered the quiet art of composure through decades of work, marriage, parenthood, and personal loss, his ability to inhabit both joy and sorrow without trivializing either feels less like performance and more like kinship. Craig understands that professionalism alone is insufficient in an age when the news cycle compresses the best and worst of humanity into a relentless stream, because what the audience senses, especially those who have lived long enough to read the subtleties of tone and expression, is whether the anchor behind the desk has allowed life to shape him or whether he hides behind a polished veneer. And it is in this space between polish and vulnerability that Craig has discovered his most meaningful growth, guided in no small part by late-night conversations with his wife, Lindsay Czarniak, whose own career in sports journalism has required her to navigate locker rooms thick with disappointment one moment and championship euphoria the next. Together, they have come to see that the true challenge is not suppressing feeling, but calibrating it, honoring the gravity of tragedy without carrying it home so heavily that it dims the warmth of family life, and celebrating moments of light without letting them appear tone-deaf in the broader context of suffering, a balancing act that resonates deeply with an audience that has spent years moving between hospital rooms and wedding receptions, retirement parties and funerals, learning that adulthood is rarely a single note, but a complex chord. There are mornings when Craig feels the emotional whiplash acutely, a segment highlighting a community rebuilding after a wildfire, followed immediately by a cooking demonstration meant to lift spirits. He has learned that the transition is not about flipping a switch, but about finding a thread of continuity, reminding viewers that even amid devastation, life insists on small rituals of nourishment and connection, and that joy, when handled gently, does not disrespect sorrow, but affirms resilience. This insight did not come easily, especially in earlier years when he feared that lingering too long in a tragic story might make him appear overly somber, or that smiling too quickly afterward might seem insensitive. Yet experience and the steady counsel of Lindsay taught him that authenticity lies in allowing a brief pause, a measured breath, a subtle shift in tone that acknowledges the emotional terrain just traversed before guiding the audience forward. For those watching at 60 or 65, many of whom have recently retired or are contemplating what legacy means in the quieter chapters of life, Craig's evolving presence offers reassurance that growth does not cease with age. He often reflects privately on how his own understanding of empathy has deepened as he has encountered more stories of ordinary courage, grandparents raising grandchildren, couples navigating illness with humor and tact, communities rallying after unspeakable loss, and he recognizes that the viewers who write to him are not asking for unbroken cheerfulness, but for steadiness rooted in lived understanding, a steadiness that says, "I know this is hard, and I also know we can endure." Lindsay's perspective adds another dimension, as she reminds him that the human spirit thrives on narrative arcs, on the knowledge that seasons change, that no losing streak lasts forever, and no triumph is permanent. And together they have cultivated a home environment where headlines are discussed but not allowed to eclipse gratitude, where children are taught that compassion is strength rather than weakness. In this way, Craig's on-air demeanor becomes an extension of his off-air convictions, a reflection of a marriage grounded in mutual respect and a shared belief that media, at its best, can illuminate rather than inflame. As the years advance and peers begin to step away from daily broadcasting, Craig feels a heightened sense of purpose in modeling this emotional dexterity for younger journalists entering the field, encouraging them to resist the false binary between detachment and overwhelm, to understand that the most enduring trust with an audience is built not on dramatic flair, but on consistent, measured humanity. He knows that the generation now in its early 60s grew up in an era when news anchors were fixtures of stability, and while the media landscape has fragmented, the hunger for grounded voices persists, perhaps even more urgently than before. In quiet moments before the cameras go live, Craig sometimes closes his eyes and imagines the households tuning in. Kitchens where coffee steams beside prescription bottles, living rooms where framed photographs tell stories of decades gone by, and he feels a profound responsibility to honor that trust by navigating each emotional pivot with care, recognizing that beyond professionalism lies something richer, the cultivated wisdom to hold joy and disaster in the same steady hands, to acknowledge the full spectrum of human experience without surrendering to cynicism, and to remind those who have seen much of life that their hard-earned resilience is mirrored and respected in the way he carries the day's news, one thoughtful transition at a time.